Tonight I'm finally getting around to making my Lee Pro 1000 Part 2 video. I posted the original one a little while back now, and I've had a lot of people commenting and a lot of questions being asked about the press. And I just wanted to say that if it doesn't work for you, it's either out of adjustment or you're not quite paying attention to a few little details, and we're going to talk about those tonight, along with some things that make the press better. So tonight I've already loaded, I've completed 5 trays of primers. That's 500. What's in here is the 6th tray of primers. I have not had one primer misfeed tonight, and I've been loading them almost non-stop for the past maybe, well, it's been about 2 hours. I stopped to take a break to eat dinner. But we're going to talk about what I've found works well for this press. The first thing that, if you don't already have, I think everybody should go spend the money. I think it costs about 10 bucks. It's the case collator. This thing is awesome. I know it's easy enough to put the shells in on your own or by hand, but once you get this thing, it is so worth the money. I think it's like $10 or something like that. My tripod's not tall enough to see the top of it, so I'm going to throw some shells in there and load it and show you guys how it works. I think I've probably loaded, I don't even know how many times I've loaded it using the case collator up on top, but every once in a while I'll get a cartridge that drops in wrong, but very, very rarely. What I found works best, take a handful of shells, and I like to drop them off on the side of the collator. That way, if you just drop them right in the center, you do have the chance of dropping a shell down the hole when you first drop them into the tray. So you just drop them in and give it a little twist. And there it is. Awful. So, when we started this video, one tube had brass in it, the other ones didn't, so there'd probably be one more handful to completely fill it up. But if you're going to get one of these presses, spend a couple bucks to get the case collator. Again, I'll show you how it looks. Well worth the money. Sorry for the shaky camera here. Okay, so let's talk about what I've done and what you can do to make this press work very well. The first thing is, if you look at the tray, the primer feed tray, make sure that there's always primers in the tube. So when I see all the primers leave the tray up here, I'll usually load it till they come just below this little notch here. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the video. So there's the chute right here, and then there's this little, where the tray plugs into the chute, there's a little black, I guess where I don't even know how to describe this thing. But as soon as I see the primers drop below that level, I stop and I fill the tray back up. Okay, the second thing that makes this press work very well, see this little zip tie I have hanging off the side? What happens is there's a little bar right here down at the bottom, and this little pin right here rides up and down, and it's supposed to sit up against this pull on the press. And if you look carefully, you can see there's a notch. See the little notch right here and down here? And so as this little bar rides up and down, it's supposed to shake the chute in the primer tray. Well, the problem with mine is, as you start to go up, it actually starts to kind of pull away from that post. So the problem is, you end up with this little bar is not hitting these ridges and not shaking the tray like it's supposed to. So what I found online, and it works awesome for me, is this little zip tie right here makes a bump stick out, and watch, you'll see the tray, watch the tray wiggle. When it hits that zip tie on the way up and the way down, it actually shakes the tray. And so that ensures that the primers up here always stay in the chute. as I've said, I'm at close to 550 rounds this evening. Not one primer misfeed. Okay. The other thing that I found works very well for this press, whether you buy cans of air or actually have an air compressor, I do over in the corner of the garage there, I do have an air compressor. I have this little air fitting. So every time I twist the tube and go to the next tube full of shells, I just give it a real good blow. That gets any of the dirt, the dust, the grime, it gets all that out of the twisting part here, or the shell plate that actually twists every time it indexes. So tonight we're loading 40 caliber rounds with Rainier hollow points. I'm just going to go through a tube here so you guys can see this thing in action. Notice this shakes every time it goes over that zip tie. Place the bullet on. Oh, I didn't want to sit on it, right? The hardest part about doing this is getting a bullet out of the box over here and getting it lined up in time to put it on top of the next piece of brass that needs to be loaded. Because of course they're all just kind of tossed into my box of bullets over here. So trying to grab them and orient them the right way to get them in ready to go get loaded that's the hardest part about this. But eventually you figure it out, you get into a rhythm. So there we go, we just finished a tube. No primer misfeeds. Everything drops a primer in perfect. In case anyone's curious, I'm using CCI small pistol primers. I know someone's going to ask. And I use this tray here to catch the bullets as I load them. This is actually, I don't know, some TV dinner thing or some dinner thing we bought. It had a real heavy duty plastic tray, so I figured, hey, I'm going to use that. Here's what I've loaded so far tonight, mostly. And in case anyone else asks, I do use tight group powder. And again, we're loading 40 caliber rounds. So now that I've finished this tube here, I'm going to take my air, give it a blow, and give it a twist. Here we go again. Helps if you put the bullet on right. Here I am choking because I'm trying to do this on camera and make it look pretty. I don't know if you could see what just happened. Yeah, probably not on the camera. When I set the bullet onto the piece of brass, it as it was going up to load into the die, it wobbled off sideways. Let's see if I can. So this is what it looks like. So that's not the press's fault, that's my fault because I was trying to get going a little too fast and the bullet went sideways on the brass. It has nothing to do with the press. So I'm going to try to slow down for a sec. Reset this thing around. Oh, we got another piece of brass in here. Alright. Now the hard part about this is if something does get stuck, you kind of have to back all the brass out of it because it's going to keep right on going. So if you have something misfeed, what I find to do that works best for me is I just back all the brass out. I get everything out. Of course that primer wants to go. And then I just start back over again. So that hang up was my fault. I set the bullet on the piece of brass incorrectly. The bullet was a little slippery. So that was not the press's fault. Now a lot of people will complain. I'm glad this happened on the camera so I can explain it to you guys. A lot of people will complain, well, that's the press's fault. No, if it was a Dillon or a Lehman or something, if you load the bullet wrong, well, the press is going to jam up. That's just the way it works. But notice again, it's not the primer feed system fault that everyone complains about. That was totally my fault. My butterfinger screwed that up. This press has now, I've kind of lost count, but I'm guessing it's somewhere in about, I'm probably closing in on 9,000 rounds or so that I've put through this press. Might even be more than that by now. Don't usually keep track. Okay, so we finished again, so now blow any dirt off of it. There we go again. We're getting close to the end of where I'm going to reload the primer tray, so I'm going to show this to you guys. What I was talking about at the beginning about the level at which I reload the primer shell, or the primer tray. Whoop. Yeah, see, you won't be able to see that on the camera. If I can zoom this in maybe, get the feet of the tripod in. I'm going to show you what I mean about the piece of... So notice the bullet is not sitting like it's supposed to on the piece of brass. This is going to be awesome photography sideways here. Anyway, if I would have raised the ram on that, it would have not seated the bullet, obviously, because the bullet's not sitting correctly. It's supposed to sit. Oops. It's supposed to sit like that. Again, not the press's fault that I have butterfingers. So really all you got to do is just pay attention to what you're doing. This press will work very well for a long, long time. I've saved so much money now on buying ammunition. I could buy a couple more of these presses and still be well ahead of what I would have costed and what it would have cost me to buy ammo. Oop, see that bullet fell again. Come on. The other option you can do is flare your cases a little bit more so the bullet has more of a funnel to sit in. I found I usually don't. Well, I found the more you flare them, the more you flex the brass back and forth, the shorter the lifespan of the brass will be. I tend to reload my brass until I can't reload it anymore. All this brass that I'm loading has probably been loaded 10 times now. And part of that is because I don't flare the case very much. So it's how far you open the case up, so that gives the bullet a bigger area to sit on. Alright, so what I'm going to show you now, let me finish this one. Okay. So back at the beginning of the video I was telling you at what point I reload the primer tray. Notice here, the last primer is right there. There's about maybe a ½ an inch gap between where this line on the primer chute is and where the primers are in the tube. So at this point, it's time to reload the primer tray. Now again, another trick that some people don't talk about, and I'll show you here. See how the tray has these little grooves in it. What works really well, sorry for the shaky camera again. I wasn't planning on doing this, but I'm going to improvise. What I found works out really well just dump your primers in. And so of course they're all different angles, some are flipped over right, some are flipped over wrong. Now what works really well is you just shake the tray, and it's going to flip everybody over for you. Now, as usual, this always seems to happen, you get this one little booger primer here that does not want to flip over. There's this one. So if you push it off to the side away from everyone else and give it a shake, now they're all right side up. Put the tray back on. Here we are, 100 more primers, ready to be loaded. Let's come back over to the press. Put this back on. I found I just put my thumb over where the primers would fall out of the chute. Bring it over here so you can see better. See, the primers aren't going to fall out. So I just put my thumb right there and then line it up to the chute. Once it's lined up, set it down, pull my thumb out, and there it is. Ready to go. 100 more primers ready to roll. Now I'm at the stage now where I'm ready to place a bullet onto the piece of brass. It's very important you keep track of where you are, otherwise you end up throwing powder off. Because right now that piece of brass that's in the third stage already has powder in the shell. So keep track of where you're going if you stop midstream. Normally I would leave the press all the way up, but it's a little harder to see on the camera, that's why I lowered it back down. That just helps me keep track of what stage I'm in, where I'm at the time I stop what I'm working on, or I stop to reload something. I've thought about getting the bullet feeder, the little fingers that actually place the bullet, since the hardest part about this is getting the bullet lined up right, and that's what takes the longest in the reloading process. And they have a little contraption that hangs off the side that kind of has tubes on it like the brass feeder does, and it holds bullets, and then it has a little finger that comes out and places the bullet on the piece of brass for you. I just haven't got that yet. I probably should with the amount of loading I do, but I haven't yet. So the only jam we had in this little session, we loaded what is that? I think each tube holds 20. So we loaded what, 50 bullets right there in this little session. We had one jam up, and it was not the press's fault. It was mine. Again, I want to just emphasize it was my fault. When I set the bullet onto the piece of brass, it went crooked, which caused us to have to stop. Again, my fault, not the press's fault. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching.